I'd like to welcome everyone to this lecture by Peter Salter. I think that everyone here probably knows Peter's work pretty well, so I don't really need to say too much in introduction. Peter's based at the Welsh School of Architecture at the moment, but he's very associated with the AA, where he taught for many years. He's been a hugely influential figure in British and world architecture and architectural education, and he was rightly the recipient of the Annie Speak Award for Architectural Education, which is a prestigious RIBA award for international architectural educators. Peter's known for his drawings and projects and for some completed buildings in Japan, which I'm sure you know, like the Mountain Pavilion. But at the moment he's working on some houses in London, which he's going to talk about tonight. It's very exciting. This is the first sort of major project, I suppose, in the UK. Okay, so it's a pleasure to welcome Peter. Thanks.
You can hear me, yes. I'd like to thank the university and the department and Mark for arranging this for me to come here. It's very nice. What I'm going to talk about tonight is a project called Walmer Road, which is on site, and it gets a bit nerdish. It starts off a bit flaky and gets a bit nerdish. I'm currently thinking or looking at Sabbionetta again, which is this ideal city in the Po Valley. And so I've got a couple of slides there, and you know, there's nothing like sort of post-rationalising things. And so I've started to connect bits of my project in Walmer Road with Sabbionetta. Well, that sounds somewhat incongruous. Oh, there it is. No? God, we're going ahead. That's terrible. Can we go back? There we go. Okay. So this is Walmer Road. Walmer Road is on the border of Holland Park in London. Very expensive area with very expensive houses, and Shepherd's Bush, which is much more particular in a way. And Walmer Road was a Victorian factory, I suppose, or warehouse. And around it there's this kind of promo studio space, two little Victorian cottages, and an 8-storey block of social housing. The client is a guy called Crispin Kelly, who incidentally was a student of mine when we went to Sabbionetta, although that's a coincidence, together. And he asked me to design 4 houses. There's one house here, another house here, and a house here. And what he was interested in is the idea of making a packed and compact building form, and to try and get, because the site's very expensive, to get quite a lot of houses on. He's subsequently been interested in suburban housing, but as a developer at this time, this project's been going on since 2006. He was interested in how you could make private houses with privacy on a very, very tight site. This is Walmer Road down here. It has various planning restrictions. I mean, from here, which is a listed tree, you were supposed to see the ridge line of this little tiny 2-storey Victorian house, which meant that all of this end of the site had to be very, very low and compressed so that it fell within the sight lines of that ridge, and that none of this part of the housing was to go above the height of this roof of this studio space here. So the notion of a kind of packed building is what you see here. This is a model done for the client so that he could see how tight it was. And it certainly is that. This is what I've been looking at recently, which is Sabbionetta, there's an ideal city. And it was built in 1591 by Gonzaga, and he originally built these defensive walls around his farm buildings, and then took the farm buildings down and built this piece of city. And you can see that it's also very tight and quite packed. And this is the site, my site, at Walmer Road. And you can see how congested it is. This is taken from the crane that moves formwork around on the site. So it is about the idea of packing. They're both about packing in a way. Here, Gonzaga, according to Benevolo, Gonzaga cited many civic buildings like the theatre, which is like a kind of Palladian model, and Mint and various other buildings. And he cited those within the walls of Sabbionetta, and then, according to Benevolo, he then joined them up with this grid. And it is really quite dense. This is Sabbionetta, and you can see on the ground floor it has a segregated set of functions. On the ground floor it had things to do with the city, and on the upper floor it had to do with housing. And incidentally, Gonzaga used to only move on the upper floor, so there were balconies and special walkways for him to get to church and all of the other things from his palace. And the other thing you'll see is that it's made of masonry, so it's heavy masonry construction, and the little streets are very narrow. And so it's this narrowness that I'm interested in. How do you get privacy and quietness into this place? And I'm interested in Walmer Road. Sabbionetta is very quiet in Sabbionetta. I mean, there's hardly anyone living there now, I'm afraid. And what he was supposed to have done is to coerce all of the farmers from around his property on the in the Po Valley to live and bring all their equipment into Sabbionetta to populate it. And as a result, it wasn't understood to be a wonderful place to live. But so the idea of it being quiet, and when you walk through the town of Sabbionetta at night, it's perfectly silent, and it's extremely beautiful in that way. So the client asked me to make 4 houses on this site, and so really this first part of the lecture is about how you get privacy and quietness within a distance of 5 meters between one house and the next. You can see this, you'll see lots of these kind of photographs, site photographs, which talk about the kind of intensity of construction in this place in relation to this sense of this packed housing. I really love this little piazza in front of the church, and it's wider than my housing. This is a courtyard which is 5 meters from there to there, and it's like a wooden room. It's an outdoor wooden room. It has wooden louvers that give privacy and direct light into the interior. This is looking north on the side, and it has end-grain wood block floor to stop sound. So when you walk across, when you walk across end-grain wood block, it's incredibly quiet. And then there are these seats which act as a kind of defensible space, and there's a place to put pot plants and to put your shopping when you're coming home. This is a drawing done for the hoarding. This is going on the hoarding of the housing, which is now trying to start to think about trying to sell houses. And I put this thing on. This is Obama. It says, Barack Obama gets a hug on the campaign trail. And I put it on because it signifies the time in which the buildings are built, and is similar to the Smithsons. There's a Smithson perspective of Golden Lane, where you see Nehru chucking a bale of hail over the balcony. And that's my original drawing, where I didn't have a sense of the space. This is much wider than it is actually here. So the ground floor is split. You come up a ramp onto an upper ground floor where there's this courtyard, and then there's a lower ramp going down to the car park. And the client asked to make sure that we can get Chelsea tractors down in the underground car park, and so you'll see that is a very, very tight set of circumstances. South sunshine comes from here. And so what we're trying to do is to shift the geometries in order to increase the perambulation around the houses, but also to get light into the building. And really to get that kind of sense of privacy between the houses, so that you're not looking at each other across this very narrow courtyard. They have different sets of accommodation. House 1 has a very large kitchen dining room with a big space at the top of the building. House 2 has a smaller kitchen dining room with a smaller space at the top of the building. And House 3 was supposed to be one of the swankiest houses, which is at the top. And House 4 is one that's in the ground. So the idea that this House 2 and House 3 are very shallow from front to back, in order to enable light to come in without it becoming too dark. This House 1 here sits on its own. It has more aspects. It means it can get sun from here and from here, and probably from the back there, but it stopped a bit. So it can be, it's a double aspected house. So it can be a deep plan. So there's a whole set of relationships between the shallowness of the plan and its position in relation to sunshine around the courtyard. I'm not expecting a lot of sun in these houses. I mean, I rather like the sort of moody and some might say dull rooms that you get, which the estate agent is not very keen on. Well, we'll see later on in some drawings how dark and reflective that might be. So there's another strategy here, which which is about how do you get light in and how do you make the most of the light that you get. On the top plan on the left is the basement plan. You can see that it has the cars go down a ramp. You go onto a turntable and they get shunted off to their respective car parking spaces. The house that is sort of pushed down is like a house that's bridges between outside spaces. So right on the edge of the site, on the top here, is a yard, and it has an external yard for its car park entrance level and a yard at the back. So you have this sense that the building is sort of spanning between holes, if you like. This is the place where House 4, the depressed, the squashed house, sits. And this is one of the early photographs of its beginning to be constructed. The planning requirements of only going up to the level of the roof of the neighbouring property meant that you had to start to think about where you put various parts of the accommodation. And so the ground floor, which you just saw, has sometimes kitchens and dining rooms, reception rooms, a piece of maybe a room for an office or a caretaker. The middle floor, which you're seeing here, has quite a low floor-to-ceiling height, and is for the bedrooms. And then you go to the top floor, where the architecture opens out. You get a different architectural vocabulary used, and it's much taller in its spaces. So these are all bedrooms, and you'll notice that, particularly in my original planning drawings, that to move around the houses, you always have to go around a bathroom, or so that you start to try and separate out the rooms, the bedrooms. I mean, these are not family homes. These are going to be homes for maybe an elderly couple, or maybe for people who live separate lives almost. And so that the bedrooms are always separated off by a bathroom. And by coming out of the staircases, you do an awful lot of walking around things in order to say, I'm off this way, you're off that way. So there's one way of getting privacy in a very, very tight site. We're still in the ground here. So this is the top floor where the architecture changes. These things here we call yurts. They look like yurts, but they're made of cold molded timber, and they're like the little dining rooms and things you get on tops of country houses, where you had to walk across the leads to have supper, and you looked out across your landscape. So here you come up to the top of the development, and you're sitting in these wooden structures. And some of them you sit on bean bags; they're quite low, and some of them become studies, and some of them are dining rooms. Meanwhile, the house 4 has finished. It only goes up to the basement and the ground and the upper ground floor. And it gets its light. It's a bit like Peter St. John's brick house, which was all top lit. I put this drawing in because it talks about the sense of congestion that you'll get. And so this is coming from the gate from Walmer Road, the pinch between buildings, so you can hardly see into the courtyard because it is pinched by the buildings around. And then into this very private, quiet, Sabinetta-like courtyard. This is a bedroom, a typical bedroom, and you can lie in bed and you have different windows for different heights. So you can be sitting on the bed, looking out the window with louvers, or you can be lying in bed and looking outside these little slot windows. And then at the ceiling height, there's another slot window, which is clear of louvers. It doesn't have any louvers in front of it. And so light can come in through that slot window at the top of the drawing and bounce across the ceiling. Yeah. So you're trying to project light quite deep into the section of the building. You will also notice that things like this bathroom pod don't go up to the ceiling. It has a glass part at the top, and so one likes to think that when you come out of the staircase, you can just about see little glimpses of light through these sections of glass, you know. And so that about sums it up. It's at the top you can just see the beginnings of one of these yurt structures. This was a swimming pool for one of the houses, which is now gone. We haven't got room for it. The client is a bit iffy about the louvers because he's worrying that people won't like that. And so he insisted that we put in a box room with a window, with a clear window, so that you can sit in that little box room, it's right at the top on the corner, and read and look out the window. You'll also see by the main window there's a kind of slab which is made of tufa. And if you go to Japan to the Hilltop Hotel, which is a very wonderful hotel, the hotel owners put in this very bizarre kind of radiator-like thing which gives clean air to the room in some way. It's like an ozone thing. And so what we decided to do is to put some tufa in the window so that you've got a shutter. You can open the shutter and the tufa is going to allow clean air to come into the room because London's quite smoggy still. The interior of the room is supposed to be quite patchwork-like. So just like in this Japanese picture of this Minka house, you're getting patches of different kinds of clays and gold leaf and light materials. So in this room, the window elevation is concrete, whereas on the one side you might have block work with a clay boarding on, which is a natural colour, more like this kind of colour. In another wall you might have a painted clay surface, and another wall it might just be left, so that you start to get this patchwork type room. This is a piece of a bedroom wall, and that slot there is for a slot light that goes over the bed head. The quality of light in the room wants to be like this. This is my practice partner, MacDonald, and a bedroom that he liked very much, and I think it's very beautiful. The light is very gentle and soft. And once after that quality in this room. This room you'll see has pieces of gold leaf on. And I'm imagining, and we're using little pieces of gold leaf. And I'm imagining that, well, I'll talk about that in the next slide. In the 18th century, door handles and particularly clocks had pieces of brass or gold leaf in order to, in candlelight, in order to be able to pick out the time of day and where the exit was to your bedroom. You know. So this idea of living in quite shallow, soft light, I'd like to bring to this building. So this perspective is about the clock with the bit of brass and the brass behind the bedhead light set into the concrete wall. This is a prototype without this horrible hinge on. I have to say this hinge is totally wrong. Of the bathroom pods. And the bathroom pods are made like they're a piece of agricultural machinery. So you're getting drip wells, you're getting spot wells or tacks, and you're getting it in a steel which is between 3 and 4 millimeters thick, really, because you're trying to keep the patina, the black carbon from the rolling mills. And so the outside of these partitions are just left carbonized black steel. The inside is then painted. You can see the sorts of colours, many coats of paint, and in some places, like in the showers, it's then covered in mosaic. So the idea that you come out of the staircase, you see these slots, maybe little slots of light from the Georgian wide cast glass over the screens, and then you get these black steel lumps. You don't quite understand them, you just see them in profile. And they are as thick as a 44 millimeter door where they need to be, and then where they need stability or where they need to take a service, they get thicker, so that the thing doesn't rock around too much, so that you increase the thickness to stop it rocking. This is another one. This was done with a piece of steel that was, I think, between 2 and 3 millimeters thick, and it's not dark enough, and one wants it black. This is too shiny and silvery. This is quite nice with the kind of torch colouring on the steel, and that is the Georgian wired cast glass that you'll get. This is the ceiling line across here. There are walls in the housing which fold back so that we're not talking about a very spatial house here. We're talking about, they're like cottages and they're cellular, and so you've got to be inventive about trying to use the space in a different way. And so there's some of the landings have walls that fold back, and so you get this kind of Duchamp type door, which on one instance is a door to the toilet, and on another instance it's a door to the room. So you can see how thin some of the partitions get. Okay. What you see on this slide here, you get that kind of, you get that reflection, and that's come off of this. So if we have a window in here, hopefully you'll get light bouncing off that ceiling. That reflection is made specially in the concrete. The concrete has a vinyl layer on the formwork, and so what it also does is it stops too many joints in the ceiling, because there's this whole thing about if you have a small room, you don't want, do you want little tiny joints between pours, or will it be too busy? So then you say, okay, we'll have large joints, and then the scale is wrong. So the idea of the vinyl is that it stops all of that, because it comes in 4 metre by 9 metre lengths. So we get no joints in the ceiling, and we get this added bonus of this shiny surface. Now the other thing about these walls, as you can see at the top here, is that the top part of this middle slide it looks paler. Actually, they're both poured together, those, but one uses phenolic plywood, which is plastic-faced plywood, which is shiny. Yeah? And because it's shiny, the light bounces off of it, so it appears much lighter. Yeah? Whereas the one below uses birch-faced plywood, and so you get a graining from the birch-faced plywood, which gives a kind of shadow. Yeah? So the concrete is much darker. So all of the concrete on the job plays with that aspect. And so mostly, this is the slot window. This is the ceiling line here. So all above here is all in phenolic faced plywood. So it reflects and it's shiny and it works almost as though the ceiling's been pulled down the wall. And then lower down, you can see here, goes into the birch-faced plywood, which is picking up shadow. And so in the bedrooms, at eye level, below eye, and at sleeping level, you get this quite soft and darker surface in relation to the light through the different formwork. This is Tado Ando's Naoshima project in Japan. And what's so beautiful about this is that it has these striations across it, which are cold joints. Cold joints are somewhat dodgy. I asked the contractor to put cold joints in. They don't like doing it because if you're not very careful with them, then you don't get a proper bonding of one pour of concrete to the other. But what it really does do, it gives you these wonderful striations and markings in the concrete. So where we're having problems with the periphery walls, because of water coming in perhaps, we don't put any cold joints. But where we have, let's say, a wall for a bedroom, you might get a cold joint going through it. So you get a striation. So you're sleeping with a striation. I'm telling you, it's getting a bit nerdy. This is also Naoshima. I mean, I think these were done just after the job the concrete work had finished and was probably still very damp and wet. I mean, but it looks extraordinarily beautiful. This is one of the ceilings in Walmer Road, and you can see that it's got reflections on, and you can see the phenolic plywood here and the birch-faced plywood there. We also use much smaller formwork ties. I mean, the formwork ties are usually very big. They're about 44 millimeters diameter. We had ours cut down so you get smaller smaller holes. And so all of these little formwork ties are there, but they are kind of domestic. They're more like the Japanese ones. These ones you can't get anymore. There's a snap-off metal tie. These are some of the early tests for the concrete. You can see here that I really like this. It has a kind of patina and aging to it, but trying to replicate that is quite difficult. And so you never know. I mean, you think concrete's a kind of industrial material, and then it has industrial tolerances and all the rest of it, but actually it becomes a handmade building. There's a cold joint, a day joint, or whatever you call it, in my buildings. This is what you couldn't see in the plan of the building, that there are now cinema rooms that go down deeper than the car park level. And this is to bump up the floor area of the houses so that you can sell them for more money. And you can see that they've got these little nibs running horizontally through it. And those nibs won't stay. Those nibs are going to be broken off. So you're going to get these striations of pebble lines. And that's part of an understanding. When you see that kind of striation going around the houses, you'll know that you're on the periphery of the building. They're almost like a joint between London clay and something else. This is a test for at the entrances on the ground floor of all the houses. They have this ribbing, which is like you would get. I always remember standing at an entrance to a Georgian house and leaning up against the door case and actually feeling that my fingers were the same diameter as the door case fluting. Yes? And so remembering that, I've asked for that to be. So there are these kind of signs of, as you go around the houses, of when you're at the periphery of the block, where you're at an entrance hall. And this is another one. This is some boardmark concrete, very beautiful boardmark concrete, which I'll talk about later on, which starts to separate out different houses. So this way is house 4, and this way is house 3. And so that there are 3 bits of vocabulary which are used for reading the housing as a lot. This is my original drawings. I should say that I forgot to mention it from the beginning, but I teach architect. I'm not actually a Part 3 registered architect, and so when I have to work, I work with a registered architect, and the job has happened since 2006. It's now 2013. It will be finished hopefully in the middle of this year. There was a whole set of drawings done by myself, and then when the job architect, the executive architects came on to the job, they redrew all my drawings, of course. And they're mole architects, and they're very wonderful. They're fantastic to work with. I mean, they're very efficient, they're very sympathetic, and they keep the guys on site in control. Anyway, so this is one of my original drawings for the front elevation of Walmer Road. And it deals with boardmark concrete. And I was wanting to make my boardmark concrete just like Carlos Garber's, which I thought was easy, but actually it's much too difficult, because there's a mixture of hammering of the board with a chipping away of the board marking, some sandblasting, and some retardant used on the formwork to get it like this. And so I tried to do the same. So this is my drawing telling the contractor where I wanted the retardant and sandblasting, and where I wanted the boards to go further in. I mean, so you get some depth to it, and where I wanted it to be proud. And it's got, you know, I've nicked a lot of stuff from Carlos Garbo. There is a distribution of boarding, which you can see here, which I'll go into a lot more later on. The client, this is Semtex. This is the guy from Cemex, sorry. And he supplies pulverized fly ash. Pulverized fly ash is a substitute for cement, yeah? And you can use up to 40% of PFA as a substitute for the cement in your concrete, which makes it a bit more sustainable. And the Cemex guy was prepared to do that, and it gives a kind of grey colour to the concrete. In other places on the job, like this up here, we're using GGBS, which is another kind of slag product from power stations. And that gives a creamier, yellower, and warmer texture. The client made a concrete house for us to try out the board marking in South London. And this one is just slightly disastrous. I mean, the edges look awful because it wobbles around because the indentations is so great. This one is much better. And in the end, we decided not to have so much indentation, so that it's much more subtle. So they go in between 3 millimeters and 6 millimeters. So they could be 6 millimeters proud or 3 millimeters recessed. And what's nice about that is that where it's proud, you can see that there's a kind of white line on top of each of the board marks. And that's a reflection from the sky. Yeah? Whereas where it's recessed, you get a shadow. And so that was really good, because that gave us a way of deciding how to set out the board mark. So much of the board marking on higher above your eye height sticks out so that it receives light. So all the boards have these white lines along, whereas at knee height, something like that, we're trying to recess them. So you start to get a kind of shadowing of the walls. This is using redwood, which is wire brushed to raise the grain. And there's been a whole set of researches done by the contractor and mole architects and ourselves as to whether you use redwood or what you use, whether you use second or third use the plywoods, or whether you have to use new plywoods. I mean, and it's all recorded, and so every time they pour concrete, it should be done exactly the same, with a view to trying to get a consistency across the job, but of course you don't. So this is a bit more of the board mark concrete. This wall is very beautifully done. I mean, it's got chips in it, and you'll see some aggregate bridging later on. Or just behind that column, there's horrendous aggregate bridging, but you can't see that. And it has place this inset into it, which are completely flat for light fittings. And this is going to be in a light well, which has got green zebra grass in the bottom, and is lit by sodium lamps. So you get this sort of green reflection and yellow sodium lamps. And you can see that when you go down the ramp into the car park and you dock your car over a big red fluorescent light. So the whole thing about colour of lighting in relation to that becomes important. The other thing is construction joints. I've always brought up with construction joints. When I worked for Smithson, my job for the Bath University building was to figure out all the construction joints, feature joints and drips in the in situ concrete. Nowadays they don't like doing construction joints. And they try and cast as big a wall as possible. And so this is the back wall of that house wall, the house that's in the ground. And it has this board mark concrete on it. And it's been cast from a huge shutter. You can see that's the shutter. It weighs 7 tons. And it's made in a joinery workshop in Essex and has been brought down to site by this guy. And this is the result of it. So that board mark concrete there and board mark concrete on the end wall then starts to work with those ribbed striated concrete nibs of the surrounding walls. This is nail shima as well, and there's concrete. And this is my drawing for the staircase drums. The staircase drums are in concrete. And they have a black steel staircase inserted into it. And I have too many construction joints in this. I mean, in the final job, there's one which occurs at kicker level on the next floor up. So there's one always at kicker levels on each floor, and that's about it. And there's one where the drum turns the corner, because you've got to, this formwork was very difficult. I mean, inside it's birch-based plywood, on the which is fine, you can bend that internally. But on the outside it's phenolic, and you can't bend phenolic plywood in that radius. So we're using melamine as a surface on the outside of the formwork there, so that we're getting, on the inside we're getting this dark, shadowy birch-faced plywood grain, and on the outside we're getting a shiny phenolic surface. And this is, again, these were made in Essex, in Elsenham, and those are the form, that's the internal form, and that's another piece of internal form for this. And this is the beginning of a staircase drum for House 1, which was the double aspect houses. They're incredibly beautiful as forms. They're like their own, like a piece. We were talking about St. Jerome in his study earlier on, about these pieces that sit. And these forms do that. And you can see how tight the job's getting. So you can just, hopefully you can get around here, because you go around the drum into this part, which is going to become a utility room. And you come down some steps down here. So everything is very, very tight, and it's made it very, very difficult for the poor contractor. I mean, I didn't realise how tight it was, because trying to make in situ concrete with huge forms being manipulated around in very tight spaces is quite a job. And one wonders whether a different kind of material could have been used to make the job easier. This is the house for staircase run, which is then going to have its black steel stair in, and you can see the grading of the timber, how it's picked up in the concrete. There's another photograph of it there. These are test pieces for lights on the staircase. There are some lights that shine out of the chamfer, which are pressed steel, black pressed steel lights. And this is a staircase for house 2. The Chelsea tractors are driving here. The top of a Chelsea tractor is just about there, going down to the parking. And here you can see these little glass lenses. This is one of these. This is made by Davy. They're deck lights, and they're cast glass. There's another one there which we're using in the yurt structure, which give a quality of light to the space. This is an example panel which was set up for AJ specification. These are the woodblock floors that make the courtyard so quiet. Now here is a snorkel. This light snorkel goes up at a kind of warped angle through the building, and it allows light, it bounces light around. It's picking up sort of southwest sunshine, and it gets light into these rooms hopefully. And it's painted on the outside. It's boardmark concrete on the inside vertically. And on the outside, it's painted with a kind of Korean temple blue, according to Anthony Malinowski, who's the guy who's doing all the painting colours for the job. Underneath here, just in that point there, all of the forces. I should tell you, this is a project which is done with, there are columns, but mostly everything's a kind of transfer slab. So in other words, you can bring forces down on a transfer slab and it distributes it until it finds a way down. Unfortunately, quite a lot of the forces end up there, and which has got a hole in it at the bottom. This is the form for that hole. So at the bottom there's a big cruciform column which is taking the loads of 2 houses onto it, and that's it there. It's been struck and it's made of vertical board marked concrete. So that goes in here. There are 2 columns underneath. There's one there and there's one over here, and the concrete work just goes completely through. This is Carlos Scarpa's courtroom building, which I think is in the Rialto fish market. And what's so beautiful about that is there's this amazing travertine floor, and then you step up onto this, what I call a timber rug. And in my houses, we're going to have that. We're going to have a timber rug so that everywhere, all the bathrooms and all the circulation areas are done in a concrete floor, concrete topping as they call it, because I hate the word screen, which is seeded, which is so it has its concrete level, and then it's the toppings put on, and we seed more stones into it, and then it's sandblasted to reveal stones on the matrix of the concrete, and then it's polished. So so that we get almost beginnings of almost as though it was like a terrazzo surface. And we're using Thames River gravels, so we're using kind of browns and blacks without too much white in, and that will sit in here. And then you walk on this stuff, and you step up onto your timber rug, which is how the room is defined. The top of the building, as I said earlier, you come out from the reception rooms through the middle layer of squashed bedroom heights, 2.4, to the top floor where the architecture changes. And this is what we call the yurt. It's made of cold moulded timber where you get thin layers of plywood which are glued and pinned, and they can take up these compound two-way curvatures. And this is a model where 1 to 25 models of that one, and they've been scanned by the timber framing company who are in Devon, and the timber framing company are then assembling them in halves and quarters depending on their size and driving them up to London. So through the streets of Holland Park they're going to get these kind of half ship-like timber pieces, and then they are lifted on site, and they will in the end be finished in a copper. The copper is going to have, it has a kind of diamond, I used a diamond tile in Japan, which allowed the kind of quite gentle facets of the form, much better than, let's say, a standing seam. So there's a diamond shape which carries around these quite delicate corners, and then it goes into, I think actually the diamond surface folds up the eaves, and then it goes into standing seams which are folded down a little way, so you never really see the standing seams, I hope. And that goes back into a flat ridge piece in copper. That has got sheep's wool inside. It doesn't have a ventilated cavity, because I didn't want a ventilated cavity because it would ruin the kind of quite delicate shape of the forms. And so we've got this special membrane, which I'm not quite sure how it works, but it deals with everyday humidity. It receives it and rejects it accordingly. I don't know how. And then sheep's wool. And this is what the timber frame company are doing for us now. They're being manufactured, two of them are being manufactured now. This is a model of the cold moulding system. And these are my early drawings of the framing for the cold moulding. Cold moulding, as skins were to be bent over the top of these 35mm plywood ribs. And into them you'll have what we call jelly mould lights, which are these carved glass lights. And you sit up there on your beanbag and have a nice time, or have a drink, or generally enjoy yourself. At one point we had a rhino model made of it. When I got the drawings, the rhino back, I couldn't work with it. I mean, it's too dense and too complicated, so now I just use it. £1,600 later, I just use it for lectures now, because I can't work. It's too much. And that's the same, that's the rhino model from this model that I made, which is about this big. The kitchens they have a proper seating level, height to sit at. And they have, like in a Japanese temple, you would have these little kind of, you can see one there, you have these little trays that sit on the altar, which have pots on them and whatever. And so we're having these little trays or stools to do for all of the cooking. And so these are drawings really about what it's spatially feeling like in each of the kitchens. I mean, we're trying to use, there in some places, we have this kind of complicated construction, and we're trying to use these different colours. I mean, on the ground floor, we're using a green, and on the middle floor, the bedroom floors, we're using this red, and on the top floor, we're using a blue, a kind of grey-blue eggshell colour. And so you'll get not many colours, these browns and dark colours and greys, and then occasionally you get these amazing bright colours. This is the detail. These are oak, reclaimed oak louvers, which give you a sense of privacy across from your neighbours. This is how they work. You have the same pivot arrangement that goes through, but the louver is arranged differently on the pivot, so that you get this sort of brick-like ordering of the louvers. And the louvers are sitting on a kind of steel substructure which is bolted back to the concrete. The concrete has its fair face on the inside and is wrapped with insulation on the outside. The wrapping on the outside is then finished with, it was to be finished with ceramica, which is a dark coloured render with little gold bits in it, which they use for tunnel linings in the underground in London, but we can't get it. It's not warranted, so we're now having to use a different render system, which we're stamping. We're putting these stamps of like egg crate box stamps onto the render, so that when the sound goes in between the louvers, it gets caught up in the render surface, which is sort of has holes in it and pockets in it and doesn't come out of it. So the render surface is helping to disperse the sound in the courtyard. These are when you look up from when you put your head out the window and you look up the rooms, I didn't like to see the air up there. And so we've got these massive gutters which block the space between the louvers and the wall and take the water away. And again, they are a copper line. This is the snorkel. It's now going to be made in situ concrete with its lining on the outside, and this is the colour of this Korean blue. So you can imagine a lot of the surfaces on the building, because houses are so close to each other, have metallic paint on them, so that the light reflects and bounces from one house to the other. And so in this place, Anthony Malinowski's suggesting this blue, which then will hopefully invade the rooms behind, which are bedrooms and dining rooms, which is occurring in that space there. You can see at the top, there are rooms that don't have any windows. There's two underneath here and here, and there's one over there. And so instead of worrying about that, we're lining it with willow weaving. So you can imagine that when you go into the room, you can smell the willow even if you can't see. I think that's it. Oh no, that's the final one. So this is a model made by students of card, which folds out all of the surfaces without the louvers on too much. And you can see the greys of the render system and the metallic paints of all of the intrusions and re-entrants, which allow balconies and light into the rooms. Thank you very much.
Peter, thanks for that fantastic sensory tour of the houses. We have some time for questions. I'll hand the microphone around if you've got questions, so the recording can pick up the questions. So, anybody like to?
I mean, the concrete, we're using GGBS on the concrete, and so we're using 35% replacement of the cement. You know, if you use 50%, then it gets much whiter. You know, and so there's this whole set of judgments about the colour. You know, and we're using 35%, which I think is going to look great. Whereas O'Donnell and Toomey have used 50% and even more, which makes it much whiter. I mean, I must say it's fantastic. So when you don't know how to make a decision, you ring up O'Donnell and Toomey, or you ring up Jamie Faubert about the black steel, or all these people have made it all before, and so they're very helpful and nice to you. Or if you want to know how much fees to charge, you ring up Caruso Singer. I mean, there's all sorts of people who are very nice and helpful to me.
Thank you. Will this be a unique housing scheme, or are you looking to the future to do this again? Perhaps not the same, but along the same lines.
I don't think the client will want to take part in that again. I mean, he's incredibly supportive, and he says if it's necessary, if you think it's necessary, then we do it. And it's a kind of very special arrangement with his brothers involved, and the contractor also has a hand in the profits. And so it's quite a difficult contractual arrangement, but I don't think that'll make him do another job which is so perhaps extravagant. I mean, yeah. But I would love to do more work, obviously.
Say a few things, Peter, perhaps about the about space between the houses, and the kind of public space of I mean, if that's the right way to think about it, and how that is negotiated, I suppose, between the. I mean, I suppose you've talked about the houses very richly in terms of the interiors, in terms of the.
Well, it is quite an interior project. I mean, all of them, even the courtyard, has a sense of being an interior. I tried to make it that by lining the external courtyard in timber. In terms of, I'm hoping that that people won't meet other people in the courtyard, that it will be quiet and solitary there, and you can imagine that on a Sunday morning, if the sun's in the right direction, you can sit on the bench and read the paper or something. There are many markers, as I was talking about. There are markers about where you feel comfortable to go, and like the benches, the fluting, the different concrete finishes, where people hopefully will start to read the space and feel uncomfortable in some certain places when they're in their neighbours, up their neighbours' nose, and where they're not. And the council was very ambiguous. I mean, the council, on the one hand, wanted me to have solid gates on the property so that you couldn't see in as the planning authority. And so the gates, which I didn't talk about, have a kind of density of wire, so that you can't see terribly well. And the fact that the houses are so close together means that you see very little from the outside, from the street. And we'll see what happens about that. I mean, the council also put a lot of planning restrictions on, like it's housing for lifelong living, so, and level access, and so, you know, these things about having NHBC accreditation for insurance purposes, which they say you have to have a 150 millimetre upstand to stop water coming in under a door, and the council wants level access. You know, so there's all of these details to do with that, and to do with you know, toilet sizes, and you know, on the lifelong living, you have to have a room which can be converted into a bedroom, and have a bathroom en suite, so that people can extend the life of how long they live in the properties for, which is quite interesting. But it starts to give a kind of flavour to the plan in a way.
Another externals question. Do you think a sudden downpour or a good soaking from the rain is going to significantly change the character of that courtyard space with the materials that we've chosen? Is that a consideration?
Well, hopefully it won't change the oak, because the oak has a finish on it. And it has a fire rating on it and all of that, so the oak won't change, but the concrete will presumably, especially the benches, will start to stain, and hopefully the woodblock floor will start to have passage marks across it, so it will get darker and slightly grubby, and you know, like in Trinity College Dublin, there are these wonderful lodges to it which have all of this end-grain timber block on, which are very quiet and beautiful, and they're dark and dirty and warm, and that's what I'm aiming for, really. I mean, I am a bit worried about the render. I don't like the idea of having to. I mean, on the ground floor, which I didn't really talk about, is that there's a double-skin concrete solution. So you have concrete wall, insulation, and a concrete wall. And originally, David Bennett, who seems to go around all of the schools in Britain talking about concrete, said, "Oh yeah, we'll do a double-skin wall. We'll have a bucket with two nipples on, and we'll pour the concrete together." Of course, you can't do that. So you pour in one wall and then another wall. And so that is where the board mark concrete is, and so you can imagine that will start to stain as well. I'm hoping that anyway. Whereas above, it goes into this render on the outside, and I'm worried about its how robust it is. So it would be nice if it was robust. And you're supposed to be able to open these shutters and see a render surface which is quite dark and patchy, you know, and it's not shiny. It is well, on the original one, it's troweled, cut troweled it's called, I think, where it cuts the surface off, so you get a kind of patchiness to it. So hopefully, if the rain gets there, it will get more patchy, and I think that's fine. It's going to be quite dark behind the shutters, so the whole sense of a kind of mood of quietness and darkness is what I think will be very, hopefully, wonderful. I mean, the copper, I mean, I used copper tiles in Japan, and they were done in 1991, 92, and that's not gone green, I'm glad to say. They remain black, because I hate that green copper. So I'm hoping, I'm hoping that none of the yurts or all of the other pieces go green, that they go black and stay black, well, at least while I'm alive.
Sorry, a follow-on question from the last, but also a reference back to the beginning of your talk when you were referencing the influence about the tight Italian space, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
And it strikes me that that's a place from a warm climate where one's trying to avoid the direct glare and intensity of the sun and the heat.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking also of another influence that might have played on the idea of trying to form dwellings around a very tight, perhaps tall courtyard, being the sort of Riyadh type development in a traditional, very high density Medina in somewhere like Fez.
Yeah.
I just wondered whether that had had any influence on your thinking about grouping houses around a courtyard like that.
I think those buildings are wonderful. The Hassan Fali buildings, I think they're fantastic, but I can't really say that I would love to say, because I'm a bit of a magpie, but that it has anything to do with that. You know? I mean, I was much more interested in the quietness of the space of Sabbionetta than I was in its warmth, you know, in a way. I mean, the houses all have underfloor heating, and in order to get the U values, the houses have also got highly combustible combustion wood burning stoves, and that reduces the U value from 0.35 to 0.2. Thank God we don't have to go beyond that, because otherwise I would be in trouble. But because the building's taken so long to build, we are subject to the regulations of an earlier building regulation regime. No, I like those. I mean, I love Sabbionetta. I love going to India and seeing those things, and the Smithson's little peak hats on Bath University Architecture School, which is the one I worked on. I mean, all of those things are sort of sitting there. Thank you.
Last question.
Has there been much interest from buyers?
No, if you can sell a house, you'll get 1%.
Deal.
Anybody who's interested can see Peter at the end of the...
I'll take my cut of course.
Okay, just before we thank Peter, I need to give a plug for the next public lecture, which is Tim Waterman on Thursday the 7th of February. The title of his talk is Topography, the Power of the Landscape Idea. So just to conclude, let's please join me in thanking Peter for the